Yeah, I get it. Okay, so what's your reaction?
Well, obviously pleased and encouraged. I think the most important thing about this decision was the decision itself. And I think the words that will matter most are the words in that 138-page document that are now processed to the appellate court and eventually the Supreme Court. And I think what was most significant about what Ted Olson and David Boies set out to do is they did not just set out to win a lower court decision. They set out to make a case that can withstand scrutiny either at the appellate level, but most importantly at the Supreme Court. They're students of history. They've been in front of the court. They've argued successfully and unsuccessfully in front of the court. They understand what the court will be looking at and looking towards. And I think the most significant part of this decision was the words that were set forth by Judge Walker that basically became the foundation to which this will, I believe and hope, will be successfully appealed and ultimately successfully adjudicated at the Supreme Court.
Those words are, you haven't cited those words.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to profess to make the legal argument that has been already successfully made by Olson and by Boies. But in every conversation I've had and every opportunity I've had to review the intention behind this effort, it's my clear understanding that the most important thing was to get a solid decision out, not just a win, but to get a decision where the arguments that were made were validated. And my understanding, based upon quick review and analysis of this 138-page decision, was that the points that they made, that they emphasized, were advanced in this decision, and that is a very significant thing. So I'll leave that to better punditry, to legal scholars, but I think the next phase of analysis of this will be the merit of the argument, not just the win in terms of the lower court, Judge Walker's decision today.
There's a stay on this decision until at least Friday in terms of going ahead with performing marriages. Have you talked to the clerk's office downstairs? Have made any decision in terms of...
Yeah, we'll do. I mean, we've always abided the rule of law. When the courts said start and stop in the past, we started and we stopped. When the courts say it's okay to move forward, we'll move forward. But right now they say crystal clear, can't move forward. No one was married today. No one was able to successfully get a certificate or a license. There were couples that showed up downstairs. There were couples that were quite disappointed by the stay. Some had come with the impression that they would be able to get married this afternoon, and obviously was another blow. Those hopes nonetheless are not dashed, and we'll see what happens this Friday, and we'll see what happens in subsequent decision, and obviously as this processes up the courts.
Mr. Mayor, you started this 6 years ago when you sanctioned same-sex marriage in 2004. What does this mean to you that this federal judge now has upheld what you started?
Well, I think it's an important point. I mean, we've had the adjudication of constitutionality in Massachusetts, Iowa, here in California, and elsewhere on state constitutional grounds. This is the first court on the federal constitutional principle. And if there's any victor in this case, it's the principles of our founding fathers that have been upheld here. And a constitution that has always, in its history, been amended to expand people's rights, never to be used to deny people's rights. And to the extent that this is the first constitutional challenge through the federal courts, this is very much, from my perspective, a narrative that we've lived through in this country. And it's a narrative that is quite familiar to a lot of folks here in California that began in 1948 and ended at the U.S. Supreme Court in 1967 with Loving versus State of Virginia. And it was the last major constitutional challenge and question around marriage this country has faced when we looked at the issue of interracial marriage. So it's a similar arc, it's a similar narrative. This is a much more fast-tracked art and narrative, so I'm hopeful. If you ask me, and I guess to your question, Rachel, 6 years ago, we'd be here this soon, I candidly would not have imagined it. You know, we've had some good days and bad days. We've seen success in terms of the issue of marriage equality being advanced around the world at a degree and pace I don't think anyone even the most optimistic assessment anyone could have imagined. But we've actually had some setbacks, self-evident, Prop 8, but also in other states that given us pause and caution. But this is a big decision. It's a big day for fundamental rights, for American values, and I'm very proud of it, and I'm proud that we played a small role here in 2004.
Will you still be a champion of this cause if you're elected?
Oh gosh, this is in my DNA. This is who I am. So to my last breath, this has never been about politics. It was never good politics. So a good politician would be more shrewd, and there are plenty of them out there that have navigated these waters. This is about a principle, and guys like me come and go. I say it all the time, and you won't need to be reminded of it a year or two from now, because I'll no longer be mayor, and you'll have an example of what I mean by that. But principles transcend, and the things you look back on in life are standing up on principle. You don't look back on political equivocation, and so you're given a moment in time to do the right thing. And for me, I say this all the time. I said this to my father, who disagreed with me on this issue. So when I say good people disagree, I mean good people that I love disagree. But whether you agree with me or not, at least you know where I stand on this issue, and it'd be nice to hear more politicians that have the courage of their convictions, the courage of their private thoughts. They can make those public. It would be refreshing. I have no problem voting for people I disagree with on an issue or two. I have a big problem voting as a voter for people that I don't trust, because they're telling me what they think I want to hear, not what they actually believe. And so for me, this is what I believe. All my cards are on the table, and it's never going to go away no matter what happens, no matter what the public opinion polls say. And I say that also as a student of history. Remind you that in 1967, 70% of Americans opposed interracial marriage, when the U.S. Supreme Court adjudicated unanimously that those laws were unconstitutional. And there is a fundamental principle here, again, a constitutional principle that's been used over and over and over again in the history of the rights movement, be it women's rights or racial and ethnic rights. They've always been expanded by the courts. And it makes sense, right? Because if you have a minority of people that are being oppressed, you can't go to that majority that's oppressing them to ask permission for equality. You need the courts to do that. That's why we have three separate, distinguished and separate branches of government, and an independent judiciary being fundamental, if you look at the history of the rights movement, to the advancements of human rights and civil rights, gender equality, and I believe marriage equality. So it's not surprising that this has taken the course that it's on. You've heard enough from me for 6 years on this.
Is there anything that surprised you about the judge's ruling? I don't know if you've had a chance to...
I had a chance to review it, and I had a chance to talk to some people that have had more time to review it. And I think I don't know if it's surprising, but I think it's compelling, and this was a point I was making when you were walking in, is the actual decision itself and how meaningful the decision will be as this processes to the appellate and Supreme Courts. It was crystal clear that Ted Olson and David Boies did not just want to win the lower court decision, they wanted to win it in the right way. And what I believe, based on what I've heard and what those that have read in detail this 138-page decision, is they won it in the right way. That's why this is an even more significant victory than it may appear just on the surface. That the arguments are compelling, that the evidentiary process that they went through turned out to be a very positive one and a successful one. And that will create a strong case, a foundation for the appellate court decision, win or lose, and then eventually the Supreme Court decision, which will be, as we believe, most pundits believe, a very close decision. And Justice Kennedy, for what better or for worse, seems to be the one, based on his Colorado decision and based on other decisions, the one that will be highlighted in the spotlight. I should also note that Scalia should certainly be. You recall in the Lawrence v. Texas decision in 2003 that Scalia, in his dissent, made the case that this opens up the door to same-sex marriage, that Lawrence v. Texas decision. He was right. It will be interesting to see how he argues this when it comes in front of him, because in so many ways he was prescient, and he'll have that opportunity to adjudicate this probably in 2011-12. So personally, this is an extraordinary moment because real people's lives have once again been affirmed. At the same time, you're tempered in terms of your appreciation for the moment because you recognize the work that lies ahead. It's not the first step. I mean, everyone says it's a first step. We've had 100 first steps. This is another step in a very long process, but perhaps the most compelling and important and historic, because this is a federal court. This is a decision based on the U.S. Constitution. And I should remind people, you know, George Bush wanted to change the Constitution for a reason, because he felt there was something wrong with the Constitution. We always felt there was something right with the Constitution, and what Judge Walker did was validate that point of view, that there's nothing in this Constitution that denies people that equal protection and due process. And it's right for the courts to make real those words, and that's what they did today.
So actually, the LGBT community has already called the people to help to elect another governor and the attorney general who's supporting the future appeal, if possibly, to overturn this Proposition A. So do you think this ruling has any impact to the November election?
Yeah, well, oh gosh, I'll leave that to more objective minds. I'm perhaps the worst person to ask that question. I'm utterly subjective. I'm in the middle of it, 90 days away from my own election, and so I'm incapable of answering that in a way that you should ever believe is anything but subjective. You know, I have strong opinions. I mean, for me, look, I'm not naive. I don't, you know, if I lose fighting for something I believe in, I'm proud. If I win giving up on something I believe in, I'm ashamed. I'd much rather lose an election standing up for something I believe in than winning one by capitulating to my true beliefs. There's a million other politicians that are better at that than me. And I hear from them all the time, trust me. I see them all the time. And I'm not saying they're better or worse. In many ways, they're better politicians. But I believe in this in my core. I'm open to argument. I'm not an ideologue about this. As I said, I have family members that disagree with me vehemently on this. They say, can't you just call it something else? I support marriage, but just, you know, it's the same. It's like I remember when I was a kid and people said, can they just not hold hands in public? You know, I don't mind people being gay, but just don't. You know, I kind of grew up with this, and it's not what I believe in. It's not what a lot of folks that are my contemporaries believe in. And I will say this: time is on our side. And I have a lot of Republican friends, young folks. They're just not caught up in this. They don't get it, and so there's an expectation that time will play itself out in a positive way from my perspective, and we'll see if that occurs, but I sense it is, and this is going to help with that process.
Thanks, guys.